Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Oliver Quinlan. I'm a lecturer in primary education at Plymouth University and a Google certified teacher, Google Apps for Education trainer as well. Now, Google asked me to come and talk about some stuff that I've been doing because I've been using Google Apps for 3 or 4 years now in teaching children from primary school all the way up to university. And I think it's a really powerful suite of tools to get people working and get them learning together. Now, one of the things I'm going to talk about today is about spreadsheets and some of the work that I've done with particularly younger children on using spreadsheets. Now, in this position at the moment with the ICT curriculum in this country, where there isn't one, and it's all being redone. But when I was a primary school teacher, we had the good old national curriculum for ICT, and one of the things that we had to deal with was spreadsheets. Now, I think spreadsheets are one of those tools which many people think are really boring and not very useful to them. But actually, once you get your head around them, as I'm sure many of you know, they can be hugely useful to you. The beginning of this year, I had 200 students starting at my university, and because of the administration systems kind of trying to catch up, we had no way to email them. And somebody said to me, how on earth are we going to email these students? We need to tell them all this important stuff. But they had a class list of just people's names. Well, everyone's email addresses work off a certain formula. It's first name dot last name at plymouth.students.ac.uk. And I was able to just put those into a spreadsheet, concatenate all of that together and come up with an email list. And most of my colleagues thought that I was doing pure black magic to be able to do that. But it's just really straightforward stuff. If you want to be able to do that, you just need to understand a little bit about how spreadsheets and formulas work. And I think sometimes people think they're quite boring when actually they're quite interesting. Now, the reason why people sometimes think they're quite boring, I think, is often how they are taught. Now, I'm not criticising anyone else's teaching here. I'm going to criticise my own, because this is an example of something that I used to do, teaching children in primary schools how to use spreadsheets. So I'd set up some kind of worksheets type activity so that they could see what it looked like. Because as with most things, start with a blank page, and it's quite difficult for children to grasp what on earth these things are for, other than kind of having grids and boxes and stuff. So I'd set up these systems. So we had a shopping list here, and they had to work out how much the stuff cost by putting some formulae in there. And I put some laser doesn't work on the screen, but I put some instructions in there and kind of set that all up. And I originally did that in Excel. And then we started using Google Spreadsheets, and I ported them over to that, basically, and it all ported through. So I'd have the children doing that. I'd come up with some slightly more complex ones in terms of how much they had to spend each day for their lunch and work out how much money they needed for the whole week and things like that. Trying really hard to come up with some context that children would be engaged with, like lunch money. And sort of ran out of ideas at this point, so went over to boxes in a factory, and they had to work out the cost and the number needed and so on, like that. And then if I was getting really complicated, maybe gave them a load of information and said, this is the stuff you need to record. Now try and come up with a spreadsheet that's going to do it. So trying to sort of scaffold them from the really simple stuff onto the much more tricky stuff. Now, the problem with that was it took me hours to put these things together, and generally the children would, after 5 or 6 minutes, be saying, Mr. Quinlan, I've finished. And I realised I was spending hours creating these different problems and contexts, only for the children to finish them really quickly. I think that's something that we often do as teachers, is spend a long time setting stuff like that up, which actually doesn't take very long for children to get through and to learn what they need to learn. Now, they did learn how to follow those formulae and things, and they did learn what the objectives were, but these contexts I was coming up with, they just weren't really interested. Why would an 8-year-old kid care about boxes in a factory? To be frank, most 8-year-old kids don't really care about the whole lunch money thing either. The idea of a school disco got them excited for about 30 seconds until they realised that all I really wanted them to do was punch numbers into a grid, and the disco was actually a figment of our collective imagination. So I thought there is something not right about the way that I'm doing this. but I didn't really think about what I was going to do with it. Now, I came to a sort of epiphany with this when we'd been using Google Docs a lot, and we had netbooks in our class, so we had one netbook per child, basically. So the children were really used to using Google Docs, to logging on, getting their documents, and getting stuff in there, and they'd done a bit of collaboration. And one day we had a skipping contest out on the playground, which was some charity thing that we were doing. And all of the children had a little piece of paper, and they had to do how many skips they could do in 1 minute, and then write that down, and they got 3 attempts. And then my PE coordinator gave me this massive poster with all the children's names on, and it had to have recorded on it all of the amounts of skips that they'd done, so we could work out a class champion and things like that. And I just put my head in my hands, and I thought, oh, brilliant, here's another job that I'm going to have to do after school, writing down all these children's names off these scrappy bits of paper and so on. But what we did was we went back into the classroom after them having done their skipping, and we had about 10 minutes at the end of the day, and I thought, oh, hang on a minute, this could be a chance to try something. I'm going to get them onto a Google Spreadsheet and see if they can actually record that stuff. So I did. So what I did was set up a Google Spreadsheet. In fact, what I might do is, I was going to show you this, but I'll show you just how easy it is to do this by going in here and creating one. So I was still in my PE kit and the kids were getting changed. So I click create, let's make a spreadsheet, create a new spreadsheet, set it up. So it just needed to be really simple, child's name, and then they had attempt 1, attempt 2, and attempt 3, like this, okay? So that was the chart, and then I just clicked on share, and it gives you all sorts of options in here. Now, lots of people will probably be familiar with the being able to add people to share the documents, so you can just put people's email addresses in there. Now, if you want to do that with a whole class, that can take quite a long time, obviously, because you've got to copy all your class list in there. If you're really organised, you might have a class group set up. But what I often do is just use this feature here, which a lot of people don't seem to be too aware of, which lets you change the settings for the access and permissions for anybody. So generally, I just set it up to be public on the web and set it so anyone can edit. And what's great about that is that means anyone can edit without actually having any sort of sign-in. So the kids don't need to log in, they can just edit it. So that's been done, so I can just come out of the sharing options now. Now, you get a massively long URL for that, which you need to share with the kids, which can be, especially with young kids, you know, they're not going to type in all of that stuff. So generally what I then do is just use a website called bit.ly, which I'm sure lots of you are familiar with, and you paste that great long link in there and then click shorten, and it gives you a nice short link. If you have an account on Bit.ly and you've signed in, you can actually customize that to be anything you want. So you can change instead of to be those random characters, you can change it to be, you know, skipping spreadsheet or something like that. So long as nobody else has used that address before, then that's fine. So I did that, and all of the children jumped onto this spreadsheet and started filling in their attempts, which I'm just going to show you this quick video to show you what that actually looks like in terms of spreadsheets. You can see here you've got quite a number of people all logged into the same spreadsheet, and they're all changing stuff at the same time. So you get different coloured boxes on there. You can have large numbers of people on these. You can do this with docs as well, with text documents, but actually with spreadsheets is a really good place to start with this because it shows you exactly where everyone is. So you saw the coloured boxes earlier. You can have 30 children on a document. Each of them comes up with a different colour, and they can be actually editing that stuff and changing it all of the time, which is really quite magic. Now at first, obviously, they go, oh wow, this is really cool. I can delete what my mate's done. And so you get one person sat in the corner of the room deleting everybody's stuff that they're putting in. You know, it happens. So one of the things I've found that you do need to do is get them used to using those tools before you do anything particularly serious with them. It's the same with most things, but sometimes I think we forget this with ICT. If you were going to be doing PE with a new piece of equipment, if children had never used a tennis racket before, you'd give them the tennis rackets, let them get the feel for them, let them actually sort of get used to the weight of them and the feel, and probably swipe them around a bit and realize they make nice swishing noises when you do that. You know, children play when they first do something, and when there's something social like this that you can interact with, they generally play even more. So I think that playing is really important, getting them to maybe do a spreadsheet, you know, with all the names in the class, and then what's your favorite color, or what's your favorite food, or something like that. It doesn't have to be intellectually challenging, but just get them actually doing that and playing around. Now, at the point where we did this skipping competition, they'd already done that. They'd already done quite a bit of playing, so they were used to using these tools. They were used to collaborating. So they just jumped in, and like you saw those different coloured things going on there, they just input all of their examples. Now, I've got an example here. This is one I did with my students when I was actually sort of talking to them as I am to you now. And they did their resting heart rate and their working heart rate. So just as a live spreadsheet to show you. Now, instead of having these pseudo problems that had been set up, the children can then have some real problems. They've got a real data set there. They've all added that in, and they've all put it in, and it means something to them because they've just done it. It's not the made-up class party or something like that, although on the face of it, this doesn't look perhaps as interesting. But what you can start to do then is you can start to ask some questions. So the first thing the children wanted to find out was, how much did my heart rate change in between when they started, when they were resting, and when they'd done some exercise? So, you know, that's, we can make a new column, we can put the difference in, and I can show them how to do the working heart rate, take away the resting heart rate, okay? And so do that with 1, and we can drag it down, you know, simple spreadsheet stuff. But this is real data that they're actually working with because they've input it all. In fact, I think what I did to give them some experience was I showed them how to do 1, and then they went in and did their own, and they saw each other's. And they saw some people do it wrong because, of course, if you do it the wrong way round and you do the resting heart rate take away the working heart rate, you get a negative number. So then we could actually have a bit of a conversation about the negative numbers and what that actually meant. They're like, oh, that negative number, what does that mean? And with the 8-year-olds I was working with, they didn't automatically know that a negative difference would have meant the heart rate had gone down. So then you've got a whole other conversation going on there. So having found the difference, then they said, oh, well, what's the... how does mine compare, my difference compare to other people? Because we talked about the fact that the difference is to do with your level of fitness. So one child might have 28, one might have 20. How can we compare that? What's kind of the standards of what other people have got? So then we end up starting to talk about averages, and then we can look at the formula that we can do for working out the average of a set of results. And then we can find out that the class average was 21.1. Another conversation to be had there maybe about decimal points for some of them who needed to consolidate that. And they can see that if their difference was above 21, then obviously that's kind of higher than average, and if it was lower, it's lower than average. So that all starts to make sense. Now, what was quite interesting was the next one that I had. They said, how many heartbeats have we got all together? And so I showed them how to do an equal sum of all of the working heart rates. And so I put that up, and all of the boys went, whoa, 1,762 heartbeats. But then that begs the question, what does that actually mean? Is that the kind of set of numbers that you can actually meaningfully total and come to some kind of conclusion? Not really. You can count a total of your own heartbeats, and that has some kind of meaning, but totaling a whole class's heartbeats, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't do anything. So that led to probably one of the biggest bits of learning that we had around this, which was about looking at data. And why do we manipulate data like this? We do it so that we can answer questions. And the how many heart rates do you have across the whole class isn't actually an interesting or useful question. It's, you know, just something that's a little bit silly, really. So they managed to learn some formulas through actually playing around with real data and real numbers, and actually discussing whether the questions that they could ask of that data meant anything. Now, that's something that would be quite hard to achieve in the same way with a spreadsheet that doesn't have these collaborative features. So I think that's really, really powerful. It's kind of a simple example of how you can take something that's often seen to be boring, like a spreadsheet, and you can actually bring it into a much more interesting kind of space with children. So getting them to interact with different data, getting people to put things together, and playing with those tools to work that out, I think is a really strong thing that's come from me, from my experience of Google Apps. Sometimes I think with these tools as well, we kind of, as I say, we teach them once and don't necessarily let students choose whether they are going to use them. And I think with these collaborative features, you actually start having conversations going on between different students about when they're going to use these particular things. And just to finish off, I had a wonderful example once of this happening. I came into my classroom at about 8:45 in the morning, and a lot of children had come in to start the day, and they had a time where they could choose to work on stuff. And there was 3 boys sat around with netbooks, all kind of facing each other, all working on something. I came over and said, "Oh, guys, what are you working on?" And they said, "We're writing a play script." But they were sat there and they weren't talking to each other. I thought, well, what's going on here? What are you actually doing? And one of them said, "Well, I'm writing the first parts, the first draft. He's going back and correcting all of my spelling, and this other person is going through and making it better and adding in more adjectives and adding in more details and things like that." Now, that was as a direct result of using this tool and not saying, okay, we've got one lesson today on using a collaborative word processor, but just looking for any opportunities to use them, to the point where the children end up choosing to use those tools for what they want to actually achieve, and talking about group work and all sorts of things. So if you haven't tried the sharing and collaboration features on Google Apps, personally for me as a teacher, I think those are the most powerful things. Cloud storage is great, but you know, loads of things do cloud storage. The resilience of having it on there, using it with Instant on Chromebooks, all these things are really, really good. But from a learning point of view, the collaboration features, for me, make Google Apps really, really unique. So I would urge you to have a go at that. Start up a Google document, share it with someone, get them on it at the same time, and that's when things start to get really, really magic, and new ways of working start to come out. Okay, I have got on here, I'm going to be hanging around for a little bit. I've done a write-up of what I've just been talking to you about. There's a link to it just there, so if you want to find out any more, have a look at my blog there, and you can get hold of me on my website or through Twitter as well. And if you've got any questions you'd like to ask, I'll be hanging around for a bit. So thank you very much. Thanks.